I told myself for a while that I wasn't able to work out because I wasn't, but now I can. I'm just not to the degree. It's you know how I mean when you haven't exercised in a while and then you get back into it, it's so depressing because you're just so much further back than you were, and it's for me it's very easy to be like, well, I guess I just shouldn't do it then. I'm good. I mean, my special went live today, and so that's nice. That's very nice. It's kind of been a long time coming, so I'm very happy about that. But it's such a there's such a postpartum aspect to it that you work on a project for a long time, and then it's like, oh, the big release day. It's like, well, the release day is pretty much me sitting in my sweatpants in my apartment, like putting things up on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. It's not really like there's no bugles trumpeting my heralding my arrival. But yeah, no, I'm great. I'm great.
Well, I actually, you know what, that postpartum thing is very interesting. So this is the day of. What happens the day after? I mean, not considering that we're still in a pandemic, but
Sure,
the day
sure. I
after,
mean,
how does that? Is the weight off the shoulders, or does the postpartum continue and get even deeper, and then you're like, I have to plan something else next?
yeah, I mean, I have found for myself, I have fought responsibility my entire adult life, which is one of the reasons I probably wound up in comedy is because I didn't want to have a job or something like that. But at the same time, I have felt that I function best when I have deadlines and there are people expecting things from me. Because left to my own devices, I will find a way to fuck around and play too much PlayStation and stuff like that. And so, there's obviously this project I've been very involved in, and it will be the next week or two will be still taking up a lot of my time, kind of trying to do some podcasts like this and things like that. But then come November, I'm gonna have to really decide, like, all right, what's gonna be my next thing, because I can't just. Although the good thing about that is that it's almost close enough that I could just roll right into the holidays and be like, I'll pick it up in 2022.
And then it's a cycle. You get back to the point
Yes.
where you're like, maybe I'll just put it off a little bit, but.
Yeah, and I am definitely prone to that kind of thing. So I don't exactly know what my next little thing is. I mean, I'm one of the nice things about uh, recording an hour is that you are kind of starting from scratch in terms of material, and it's kind of fun to build up time again. Um, what was different about this special for me is that a lot of times when you record an album or a special, you're really sick of doing the material by the time you're recording it, and so by the time it's over, you just kind of want to like never think about it again. Whereas a lot of the stuff for this special, because of the pandemic, there wasn't really a lot of time to perform it. And even though a lot of the material I had been doing for a few months or even a year, there's a couple bits that were actually quite old that had just never found a place on another album that made it on this one. Um, but a lot of the material was still kind of new and fresh when I recorded it. And so I, definitely over the course of the early 2021, I definitely was performing a lot of the material from this special. And so it's only now that I'm actually starting to build up time again. Um, but that's kind of that's really, as a stand-up for me, that's kind of the sweet spot is when you have new material, but you're not sick of it yet, where it's polished enough that it's going to go well, or that you have like some sort of foundation for a new hour, but it's not like verbatim. You're not just reciting it. It still feels in the kiln, for lack of a
Yeah,
better word.
definitely. And this one was interesting because I think comedians, they had two choices, to either mention the pandemic or to not do so,
Mm-hmm.
if they record their special or album in the middle of the pandemic. And you chose to go full tilt right into it, and it does pay off, and it shows so much in the joke writing and the telling. And then also physically in the crowd aspect of it too.
Right. Sure.
Just people sitting around. Um, was it a so it was a mix of the jokes from before the pandemic with other specials, and then that you haven't done yet, and then these pandemic based jokes. Was that an easy decision for you to just go ahead and say, I'm going to do coronavirus jokes?
It felt natural at the time. It was just because I was sort of living and breathing it in we all were, of course, but as I don't know how much of the if you've gotten to this part in the special, but my wife and I were actually living at the venue where we shot the special at the time because we had not lost, but we had given notice on our apartment in New York before the pandemic started. And then when the pandemic started, we said to our landlord, like, hey, can we actually stick around? And he's like, nope. And so we had to vacate. And so, QED, which is the venue that my wife owns and where we shot the special, we were actually living there half the time. Half the time we were living up in a cabin in upstate New York. But then every Wednesday through Saturday, we would be in the city, doing shows in the QED backyard back when that was still tenable. You could have 28 socially distanced people out there is how we could swing it. And we had a mattress backstage and we were sleeping there, and I had a foot operated camping shower in the basement that I would use to bathe. And it was real. So it's like, it wasn't just the pandemic was maybe more all encompassing for me than maybe for some other people, because it wasn't just that comedy was gone, but like my apartment was gone. I was, living, breathing, we had two dogs in the play. It was just a surreal year, even above and beyond all of the, death, I guess would be the word. And so I kind of, at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I've got just about an hour, like, that I've been working on, and let's just go for it. Like, why not? Like, I have this opportunity. I have really talented friends. My friend Victor Varnado, who directed it, and Steve Rosenthal, who edited it. They had worked on a special that I had been a part of a bunch of years ago called Tell Your Friends. And in my mind, it's the best looking stand-up special that I've seen. It was Kristen Shaw and Kurt Brownell were in it, and Reggie Watts and myself and Rob Pervoni and Leah McEnany. It was kind of an independent sort of project, but it just looks better. It looks cooler than most stand-up specials, which to me is a lot of times it just looks like turn on the camera and then either that or they have those like really cornball swooping shots over the audience. And one of the things that I said to Victor when we started working on this project is that I want it to feel like the opposite of badass. Like, I'm so sick of badass. I'm so sick of like, flames in the background and, either hip hop beats or like raging guitar in the background. Like, no, I want to bring it down. It's like, I'm a working comic trying to make it through this year like everybody else. And I wanted the special to kind of have that vibe. And I think it, I don't know whether it's a vibe other people are interested in, but to me, it felt way more true to the way, not just the way 2020 felt, but the way that sort of life as a sort of just plugging away working comic feels, than the sort of 1,000 people, that's great. I've had shows like that. I'd love to have more of those, but that's not life as I recognize it. It's not comedy as I recognize it. This to me feels way more like the way a comic's typical life feels. Like these shows, it's a little looser. It's a little more. There's a little more screwing around. It's not quite so much of a recital as some of the other ones.
Yeah, I remember that story. I listened to Never Not Funny, so you were on either before you were about to shoot the special or directly after, and it was very, very funny to hear that story of you guys being in that apartment and then having to leave, and then going up and down between your cabin home and QED. But I did want to touch, actually before I touch on QED, your thought about your mention about like the badassery of someone's comedy special. It's an interesting thought, and I do agree because this one, your special, and someone like, I think Chris Gethard, I spoke to him a couple of months ago about his latest special. Both were documentaries, in interspersed between, the comedy.
Yeah.
And I've learned something about myself, especially over the past year, that if you're going to do a comedy special, I want you to stand out from everybody else as opposed to doing the same thing. And so this really stuck in my mind as something that people can look forward to watching, besides the comedy aspect, but to learn something about, like you said, the working comic during a time where everybody else is struggling the exact same way.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I was hoping that would kind of come through. And it's always a bit of a nuanced line to find, because you don't want it to be like, I'm the artist and this is my process. Like it can sort of devolve into wankery pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, first of all, it's an easy decision to make for me, in the sense that, maybe if I was, if I was Kevin Hart, and I had the option to go play an arena and have 20,000 people screaming my name, maybe I would be seduced by that. But that's not really on the table for me at this juncture. And so I just wanted to do something that felt, I mean, honestly, even that is overthinking it. I really just wanted something at first it started with just something to give me something to focus on during the pandemic. It's like, I just need something to look forward to. I need something to just circle on my calendar, again, about putting sort of a deadline in front of me. And it made me, really work on my material in a time when there really wasn't any other reason to work on material, because, the shows that did exist were Zoom shows, or they were outdoors in Central Park or whatever. So it would have been very easy to kind of just let my sort of comedy muscle atrophy. And, but I just needed something. I needed something to sort of look forward to. And then from there, it kind of then broadened into something bigger when we started to start shooting some doc footage and things like that. But yeah, I mean, you at the end of the day, it is comedy. You want it to be funny. You want it to be about the material. You want it to be about the jokes. But why not do something that feels specific to you? And I hope that, probably more than anything I've ever done, this feels like a product of me, as opposed to a product of a company that I then just sort of did my material for. And so I feel this feels like the birdhouse that you built yourself, as opposed to the one you went to Home Depot and got, And the one at Home Depot, maybe it'll last longer. maybe it's a little fancier or whatever, but you're always going to love the one that you built from scratch yourself. There's always going to be some, love there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then, like, speaking of the love and the hands-onness of it, it did feel very hands-on. It came across, especially seeing you carry out chairs to the backyard and set everything up. And it was very, very genuine. And that really is something that does stick out. So even if the birdhouse doesn't last very long, people are always going to remember that, oh, wow, that birdhouse that, broke after a couple of months, it was a cool birdhouse. That's really neat.
I think so. I hope so. In some of it, I think was a little bit kind of telling on myself that, I don't know how to say this properly, but again, the sort of opposite of badass thing, where it's like, my life isn't badass. It's very lukewarm assed. I have a very normal. I mean, it's not exciting. My comedy, my life as a comedian is not me in private jets and doing blow and stuff like that. It's me taking out the garbage and setting up chairs and things like that. And, and I'm also, obviously, with my wife owning a venue, I kind of see it from both sides, because I help her. I mean, it's our money. It's her place. She's the boss in every way, shape, and form. But, I spent a lot of my life helping and doing things for QED. And I'm super proud of it in a way that I've never really been proud of anything of mine personally. But, it's almost easier to be proud of something that you're working with as opposed to yourself. It feels less self-aggrandizing. Like, I can say QED Astoria is fucking fantastic and everyone should go there. Whereas it's a little weirder to be like, I'm the best and you guys should come see. Like that doesn't feel as natural to me. And so I also just kind of wanted, because I don't know what the future is going to hold. And, there's something I said in the special that I didn't know whether it was an advertisement for QED or a eulogy. And it's been, over a year now since we shot it. And I still don't really have an answer for that because it's tough. It's tough right now. I mean, just because I think a lot of people think because their local comedy club or their local rock club or their local bar that puts on comedy shows, because they're open, they think that they've made it, that they've made it through the pandemic and everything's wonderful. No, it's really, it's honestly harder now than it was then. Because whatever grant money you were able to get, you've gotten, and that's it. There's no more money coming down the pike. And there's also, landlords are starting to say, time to pay up, and people just aren't coming out as much as they were before the pandemic. This Fridays and Saturdays are okay, but on a Wednesday night, my wife said it kind of perfectly. She's like, if you're working from home right now, you're not showering and putting on pants to go out to a comedy show on a Wednesday night. It'd be one thing if you're like, hey, after work we'll go to happy hour and then we'll go see a show. It's like nobody's leaving there. Like people have learned how to be home. You know what I mean? And so I think it will get back to something resembling normal eventually, but it's going to be, Delta is going to have to be a thing of the past. And people are also just going to have to remember what it's like to be, to want to go out more. People just aren't going out as much now. And so I'm so proud of QED, but I also thought, like, who knows how long this is going to last, and I kind of want it documented on film somewhere officially.
Yeah. What are you seeing from your wife, like from being, watching her run this place and try to book comics and work with crowds and try to just get more people in? What are you seeing during this time that differs from the besides people not showing up and staying at home, that differs from before? Because there's just more work in terms of checking vaccination cards and the sort of logistic stuff, but it's more work for less money is really what it comes down to. That's you hear a lot of stories about people not wanting, how these restaurants or companies that can't find employees to work for them. It's like, well, if you're a waiter, do you really want to work harder for less money right now? It's like, do you want to have to wear a mask for 8 hours for an empty restaurant where you maybe, would make a third of what you would have made 2 years ago? Yeah. And it's, that's one of the things, like, QED, the staff right now is a bit of a skeleton crew. We have what we need, but before the pandemic, we had 4 bartenders and 4 different door people, and there were 7 nights a week, 2 to 4 shows a night, depending on the night. Wow. And now it's like it's Wednesday to Sunday afternoon is, and even those, it's a bit of a struggle. But yeah, honestly, being married to someone on the business side of things has opened my eyes up a lot. I think comedians can be very navel-gazy and are just a little solipsistic, lack of a better word. They don't really see it from the other side. They don't understand how much of a drag it is when it's Saturday night and somebody bails on a set half an hour before the show, and all of the just chaos that creates, and for me, because I'm helping with a lot of the stuff. It's like, oh, great. Thank you for tossing this live hand grenade into my evening, and people they do seem to be bailing a lot more. And I don't know what it is. Like comics, I feel like have gotten a little lazy, maybe because it doesn't feel real yet. It doesn't feel normal yet anymore. Right. But comics, I feel like, are not really acting with the degree of professionalism that they used to, because everything feels a little bit loosey-goosey and like, who cares? And it's, it's not just comedy, it's everything. There's a genuine malaise going on with people. I think it was that thing where, when everything looked like it was going great in the spring, when vaccines had come out and people started to kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel,
And then to have that sort of door slammed shut again when Delta started coming up, it had a real. It's like that fool me once, shame on me, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I feel like people are now gun shy to have any optimism at all, you know,
Yep.
and that will change over time. But I think that it is trickling down into the ways, you know, just how everyone's acting. I feel like people are kind of, every commitment is kind of a soft commitment. Every, you know, like, you know, you make plans with people and chances are you're going to want to bail or they're going to want to bail. You know, it's just everything feels like it's written in pencil right now.
Yeah. It's bad to see and it's insane and it sucks. And I just want every comedy venue. I live down the street from an improv theater and I just want it to survive.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I'm on the volunteer list and I haven't volunteered in quite some time, but I still want them to, you know, they just open back up. I want them to be
Sure.
as profitable as possible. And it stinks to be on this list of people for volunteers and they go, well, we lost our creative director and we lost, you know, this person. And it's just,
Yeah. You know, and I, you know, in my whole sort of philosophy, for lack of a better word, and it kind of shows through in the special, is just, you know, at the very end, you haven't seen, at the very end, it just, there's some writing on the screen, as you know, throughout the special.
Right.
And just the last word is just onward. You know, it's just keep your head down, man. Just forward, just keep going, you know, because this will work itself out if you can just hold on and don't get too high, don't get too low. Just keep, you know, plugging along until one day you'll look up and all of a sudden it'll be sunny outside. That's sort of my philosophy. I hope that I'm right about that. I'm not generally a very optimistic person, but I do believe that things work themselves out one way or another over time. You know, it's just that this has just been a lot longer of a haul. I mean, I remember when, you know, this all started, when QED initially closed in March of 2020, I remember saying, like, what's the worst that could happen? We're closed for 4 to 6 weeks and then everything's fine, you know, and now here we are 18 months later. So, again, I don't think everything becomes wonderful, but I do think that, you know, people get bored of being sad eventually. You know what I mean? People get bored. I think people are going to get bored of staying inside. Younger people are going to come along and they're going to get bored of being inside. They're going to want to start hooking up again, and that will be the thing that gets things back to normal. It's just a horny 23-year-olds.
Hey, look, even the horny 28-year-olds, we're getting out there.
Yes, you got it. You got to, man. I mean, you got to. You're the. I believe the horny 28-year-olds are our future. I believe is how the song goes.
That is exactly. I did want to ask you about your Comedy Central Presents stuff. That I remember when, you know, early on when Comedy Central was still doing comedy specials in the early 2000s, and they would play that constantly. It's like your episode, Carlos Alisraki, Alonzo Bowden. Like I remember like very specific episodes of Comedy Central Presents and specific jokes. And you don't get that anymore because that was like the only comedy that was on.
Yeah, there was a monoculture at the time. Like, you know, if you wanted to watch comedy specials or you wanted to see comedy, that was the easiest way to do it, is just flip through, see what's on Comedy Central. Yeah, I mean, I get the benefit, obviously, of that. You get the downside, too, in the sense that, you know, I didn't get paid really for any of that. Yeah. I mean, nowadays you can kind of monetize, you know. I remember people talking about how in the day of Carson, you know, that there were like 2 or 3 gatekeepers. You know, that if you did a set on Johnny Carson, then you would work for the next 3 years. Like you would be booked in clubs and like you had a career. Yeah. That doesn't exist anymore. There's now 1,000 gatekeepers, but each gate is worth 1,000th as much, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so I don't think it's better or worse. It's just a totally different model now. And so, you know, you see people who, comedians even, not just podcasters, but like comedians who have podcasts, and they've monetized their podcasts and they have, you know, 200,000 subscribers and they're clearly making great money. and I've never heard of them. I've never heard of them. And I'm reasonably involved in the comedy world. You know what I mean? But that's kind of more what it's become about, is just like find your little group of people and cater to them, you know, as opposed to kind of the idea of I'm going to do a Comedy Central special that will make a tiny little impact on a lot of people. Instead, I'm going to make a major impact on a smaller group of people, I think. But I've managed to do neither. So
I want to bounce off of that comment about the comedians that you've never heard of. It's interesting because that same thing can be applied to people who are on YouTube and they have 1 million subscribers. I've never heard of them, but they also tour with stand up, and I have to think, when does that person call themselves a comedian? Like, is it when people are coming out to see them? Do they do it at a point where they have been doing it for a couple of years and go, hey, I'm a comedian now? Or is it just like, hey, I make comedy sketches on YouTube and I consider myself a comedian? When did you find that you called yourself a working comedian? Like, when were you comfortable with that?
I think once I did Premium Blend, which was the old Comedy Central like showcase. Once I had a TV credit or two under my belt, I feel like I could reasonably say that I was a comedian. Up until then, I would say I did comedy. Yeah, I do comedy, but I would not necessarily have said I'm a professional stand-up comedian. I don't think you necessarily have to have quit your day job, because there's a lot of day jobs that are kind of vague. Like if you write for a television show, that's technically a day job, but it's obviously a very big deal in comedy. I mean, in terms of I get frustrated sometimes with the comedy industry, and we've kind of done it to ourselves, in that a lot of these sort of people who have success, either on YouTube or Twitch or these various online platforms, and they don't know how to monetize it beyond just advertiser dollars. And so they start doing comedy clubs just because it's like comedy clubs just want butts and seats, a lot of them, and they don't really care whether you're really a comedian or not. There can be a bit of a just get them in the tent philosophy. It's like, and it used to happen with Twitter, and when Twitter was first a big thing, there were a lot of those Twitter famous comedians who would pack comedy clubs, and they would disappoint audiences because it doesn't matter how funny you are on Twitter or on YouTube or whatever. It's a different animal. I'm not saying it's harder or easier. It's just different. Right. Just because you're good at baseball doesn't mean you're going to be good at basketball. Michael Jordan proved that, or in reverse. But so I mean, that's always going to be a thing. I mean, you'll see at comedy clubs, they'll have like soap opera stars show up and make appearances, wow. And also a lot of celebrities who kind of like were like Steve-O, from Jackass, started doing comedy clubs, because it's like, well, what else is he going to do? He's not writing scripts. He needs to do something to capitalize on the notoriety he has. And a lot of comedy clubs just see, oh, he's a celebrity, we'll con people to come and see him. And so, I mean, it's frustrating that happens, but I can't really overly, it's just, I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about the big TikTok star who's now headlining the comedy club. Yeah. And I don't think that means they're necessarily going to be terrible. Maybe they'll learn how to do it as well. But again, it's a different skill. And I wish that people kind of appreciated that stand-up is its own thing, and it's not just being famous in front of people. Yeah. But
do you think there's any room for, like, right now it's all about multi-hyphenates? I'm a writer, producer, actor, musician, all this stuff. But comedians, a lot, especially the touring ones, they are hyper-focused on, doing stand-up. And yes, some of them would love to write, but a lot of them just like the love of going around touring and doing comedy. You think there's any room left for that person in the entertainment industry?
I mean, we'll find out. You're certainly correct, and sometimes I worry that when I get too hyper focused on, like, I'm a comedian and that's what I do, and I'm not a multi hyphenate and this is what I do, it's a little bit boomery. Like maybe I'm a little like sound like an old guy a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I definitely do think that the sort of culture now encourages you to sort of try to be 10 things at once. And my feeling has always been that you're going to be 1/10 as good at those things if you're 10 things, but that's me. And and also a lot of the things that a lot of people that call themselves comedians slash, a lot of those things that they also are, to me, are kind of almost contrary to comedy. You know, to be a comedian slash model, to me,
Yeah.
is just like, those are in opposition to each other, like into like personality wise. For me, you know, I don't understand it. You know, I just don't. To me, people get into comedy because they're not models. I don't know. I mean, it's not as simple as that, but I think that a lot of people think smiling a lot is being funny,
Right.
or you know, there's a difference between being amusing and being funny. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but like being funny, there's got to be like a bit of a catharsis to it. Like there's got to be a little bit of a release, or a bit of a, not a dirty feeling to it, but there's got to feel like a little bit of an edge or something.
Yeah.
Whereas being amusing is like a person in a commercial is amusing, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, the progressive lady is amusing. It's different to me than being funny.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, God bless them. You know, younger people are so fucked. You know, they're so fucked in terms of being able to make money and stuff like that. So it's really hard for me to begrudge anybody. You know, I came of age in the 90s, you know, when I could just go get a temp job anytime I wanted, really. You know, I don't take that for granted. Like these, you know, I don't want to be one of those fucking, you know, people like my dad's generation who's like, oh, these kids, they just got to work harder. It's like, your one job paid for a house, for your kids' college, like all these things. Like those are not options now. People have to hustle 10 times as much because, again, all the opportunities they get are worth less. And so it's really not my role to tell anybody you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. My feeling has always been that young people are always right because they end up being the only ones left, you know, that they win because that's the culture's going to go where they're going.
Yeah.
So it's not for me. Let's put it that way. But whatever you need to do, man.
Hey, that works.
Sorry, I talk too much when I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No. I think you gave great answers that were fantastic to all the questions. You think you talk too much. I talk too much until I get to the point. I gotta wrap it up sometimes. You know.
I think it was either Lincoln or Thoreau. I don't remember who said, "How will I know what I think until I see what I say," which is I should look that up. But yeah, it's, to me, that resonates a lot. You know, sometimes you have to actually say something out loud and be like, "Oh yeah, that is my opinion." What do you know?
Yeah, that's how you know, people, great speakers like Obama, you know, or they just talk slowly and until they get to a point, and then that's when they get it. Like, okay, all right, we got it. They don't use like or or but. They just.
I know, man. I am so of the like era. It's just ingrained. Luckily, I'm old enough that I don't really have to contend with upspeak as much.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, when I was young, like I remember when I was in like high school, college, people who would do that, who would talk like this, they were few enough that like collectively people would mock them. But now to me, it's just like the way people talk. Like you hear more younger people speaking like that than don't speak like that. So again, they win, we lose.
You see even people in the Times, like in the New York Times, even writing like that, and I can tell because it ends in a question mark.
Yeah,
it's like a statement. Yeah. Question mark, and I always go, are we really gonna put that in this Pulitzer Prize winning paper, you know?
Yeah, and again, to me, even when people say it when they're just speaking, it's kind of almost a way of leaving yourself wiggle room, like I just did right there. Like leaving yourself wiggle room so you're not fully committing to what you're saying. Because so if you disagree, I can act like I'm just throwing it out there. It's not really my opinion, you know. That's sort of, but you know.
Well, Christian, thank you. I didn't want to take up too much of your day.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate your taking time, and thanks for being so thoughtful with your questions and for giving the special some attention. I really appreciate that.
Of course, anytime. Like I said, I watched the Comedy Central Presents for way too many times, and way too long, even the premium blend stuff. And so it's always a joy to talk to somebody that I've seen and known and heard for a very long time. So this is truly great, fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chad. I appreciate it.